Hello, gorgeous people, and welcome to another TV Central one-on-one podcast. I'm Aaron Ryan. This is episode 55, 2023. The ABC is returning mother and son to our screens, combining the comedic talents of two of Australia's most beloved comedians, Matt Okine and Denise Scott. This fresh reimagining of an iconic family favourite is guaranteed to win the hearts of those who know and love the original and delight fans of contemporary Australian comedy. In collaboration with the original creator, Jeffrey Atherton, recreator and writer Matt Okine, alongside the producing team at Wooden Horse, the team have created the perfect blend of wit, humour and relatability, promising viewers an unforgettable and laughter-filled experience. Stand-up comedian, author and radio presenter Matt Okine, and can now add actor to that list, although actually this is not his first rodeo, filling the shoes of one of Australia's greatest comedian talents, Gary McDonald, in the role of Arthur. Matt Okine joins me now here at TV Central. Matt, thanks for being here.
Well, I mean, when you talk about filling the shoes of one of Australia's greatest comedic talents, you start putting the heebie-jeebies in me, man. I'm starting to get nervous when I hear stuff like that because they are big shoes to fill. But thankfully, I've got size 15 feet.
Well, that's actually the first question I wanted to ask about this pressure. I know this is probably the number one question you get asked, but you are reimagining arguably one of Australia's finest comedies, Mother and Son, with Gary McDonald and Ruth Cracknell. I know it is a fresh version, but some are going to compare it with the classic and are going to have big expectations. Are you worried at all by the feedback from viewers that know the classic version inside out?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I'm worried. I'm absolutely worried. I waver through, confidence. Some days I wake up and be like, "No, we got this." And other days I wake up and go, "What was I thinking? Why did I put myself in this position?" But that's part of that fear and that pressure is part of the reason of why I wanted to do it. I mean, it's a big project. Everything about it is big, and it's there are big expectations and there is a lot of pressure, and I am proud of the fact that we've gotten this far, at least. And I think that the only way I would have failed is if I hadn't tried to do it. So there's always going to be haters. And at the end of the day, I see haters as a good thing now, because it just means that the thing that you're doing is in front of people who don't necessarily like you, but have to see it because it's everywhere.
Yeah, it will be.
I know.
Are you going mainly by memory, or when you started this recreation, which I know is going back a little bit, did you go back and watch every episode 100 times?
Yeah, look, I watched so many of the original episodes, and I didn't watch it from start to finish. I watched it just kind of jumping around season to season, and that was actually really good. It was a really good way to approach it because it reminded me of how accessible the original series was, that you could literally just go jump to season 5, episode 3, and just turn it on and watch it and love it.
Yeah.
And so when we were crafting our show, we really wanted to make the same kind of basically sitcom. It's just a situational comedy between these two characters. And yeah, there's a little bit of narrative, but the focus was really on making sure that there was just laugh out loud comedy in every single scene and moment, and that we could appreciate each episode for what it was. So, I mean, we got Jeffrey kindly after we were lucky enough to get it over the line with him. We had access to use all those scripts. But part of the reason why we were remaking it was to show a different Australia from the one that existed 40 years ago. And so it was also kind of important that the voice that we had wasn't his and was mine. So the similarities between me and Jeffrey are actually pretty surprisingly similar, really. I mean, both being 35-year-old comedy writers, at the time. So it's like, well, he was capturing Arthur's voice at that time. So it would be important for me to capture Arthur of today's voice.
So just expanding on that for viewers that know the original, what elements will we see in this new version and what changes can we expect?
In a production sense, the original was done in a studio, I think 3-camera format in front of a live audience. And it was pretty impressive the way that they did it. Jeffrey would write the scripts every single week. He wrote every single episode. I think
Wow.
he wrote about 42 episodes all by himself. I mean, it was incredible. I with our 8 episodes, I had 2 different co-writers. So I wrote a bunch of episodes. We had Sarah Walker writing a bunch of episodes, and then Tristram Baumba co-writing with me on a couple of episodes. So it's done. We did single camera shoot on location mostly. So that production sense, that's different. And I like the way that captures the difference between Australian television styles. That's, the in studio, in front of audience style was very much in the 80s and of the time. And now this single camera on location format is what's changed. But when you actually look at the family, obviously there are cultural differences because I'm half Ghanaian. There is an African element to this show that is a natural inclusion to any household that is of a mixed race nature. And, a lot of people, especially the naysayers, are kind of angry about that. And that's kind of probably the most frustrating sticking point for me when we look at the differences, because it's probably the least significant difference in the show, yet it's the one that's getting the most attention, because there are so many things that have changed in 1980s Australia to now that we've tried to capture. And a lot of that comes down to, approaches to aged care, which have changed since there's been a Royal Commission into aged care since the 80s. Technology. How do you, in one of the episodes, my character tracks Maggie because he's worried about her, because he's worried that she's going to get lost, but he also doesn't want to tell her that he's tracking her. Now that would never have been possible in the 80s, but that's happening now. And the question is it okay? Are you allowed to do that? Is it morally right? And I don't know. I'm not saying whether it is or it isn't, but I wanted us to have that discussion in this show. Arthur has to decide whether he wants to be a sperm donor to a same-sex couple. It's super unlikely that you would have seen that in 1980s Australian TV. And now we're showing it here because that is something that a young single guy like Arthur, and I've got friends who've been put in that position to go, is this something that I should consider? Do I want to do this? With a lesbian couple that have approached me or that I'm friends with from around the corner, is this a viable way for us to have this family? And so there's so many little questions like that I think are far more interesting than the fact that my dad's Ghanaian. But I mean, that's a really important part of it as well, because I am just a son. Like Arthur is. And that's really all it was about. So for me to exist as a son on TV, I have to have mixed race parents. That's what Arthur has. That's just the only way that it is possible to be portrayed. So, there's a cultural element, but there's also so many different elements about what's changed since the 80s to now.
One of those scenes there that reminded me, where Arthur's actually tracking Maggie with the mobile phone, and it all seems...
It's a collar. A dog collar.
Oh, yeah. It didn't seem all that bad, but until you saw it from the perspective of the potential girlfriend who thought you were mad. But
yeah, exactly.
Filling the void of Ruth Cracknell as Maggie is one huge feat. I think, was there an auditioning process, or was Denise Scott always the number one person in mind, or did her audition just blow it out of the park?
No, there was never an audition. I mean, the reason why I came up with the idea was because me and Denise were on tour in Hong Kong, and I remember just really enjoying the tour with her. And it's funny because I have this great memory of it and really connecting with her and thinking, God, wouldn't it be great if we did this show? And it was all in my head. I mean, I have no idea what she thought of me. She probably thought I was an annoying, up and coming comic, thought he was too good for himself or whatever. And so she probably didn't give it a second thought, but I spent 10 years going, God, wouldn't it be great to do this show with Denise? Wouldn't it be great to do this show with Denise? So there was never anyone else that I wanted to do the show with. And I was really excited when she said yes. And the shoes are big for her as well, because Ruth Cracknell was widely loved and was also a great performer. And Denise, knows that. And we've talked about it. It's like we know what we're faced with, the task that we're faced with. But just because it's a difficult task doesn't mean that we're not going to do everything we can to try and do our best to, live up to those standards. And it's not trying to be better than anyone or trying to be like anyone. Yeah. We're just trying to be our versions of these characters and hope that people like and respect them as much as they like the original ones. But I mean, there were a few moments when I remember early on we all got into this Tarago after we'd filmed one of the episodes, and we were going back to unit base, and makeup teams in there, me, Denise, the driver is in there, and there was just one seat in the middle at the back that was empty. No one was in it. But then suddenly the seatbelt sign started going off, ding, 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 as in there's someone sitting in the back seat without their seatbelt on, but the seat was empty. And Denise straight away just said, "Oh my God, it's the ghost of Ruth. She's coming to check up on us. Make sure that we're doing a good job. We're doing a good job for you, Ruth. We promise." So,
Maybe it was.
There was never any moment where we weren't aware of the pressure and the expectation. And, we really worked hard to live up to it.
Not everyone will have seen the original, so you're going to have a whole group of new viewers. So for those people, tell me about the character of Arthur.
Yeah, so Arthur's 35 years old. He's just moved back into home because he's been dumped by his girlfriend quite unexpectedly, because they want different things. And as Arthur puts it, in the first episode, basically he feels like she wanted more sex, whereas she just wanted connection. And Arthur is journalistically in a bit of a rut. And again, that's another thing that I really liked, showing the differences in, what is a journalist these days and the different lengths that people are going to, and the sort of when you're in the media. Back then it was like newspaper, radio, TV, and the jobs felt, maybe it was just from an outsider's point of view, but the jobs felt secure, and there was career paths. And now when you're in the media, it's kind of like the Wild West. Sometimes you don't know what's going on. There's you don't know whether you should be on TikTok. Are you supposed to be doing podcasts? Are you supposed to be doing blogs? Are you supposed to be writing for traditional media? Should you be doing TV presenting? Should you be going on radio? There's such a freelance culture that you're often just jumping from one thing to another without any kind of borders. And I wanted to capture that feeling for Arthur as well, because in one episode he's trying to set up a website that's like a male version of Mamma Mia. In the other, he's trying to do his podcast. In the other, he's filming reviews on a little selfie cam with a selfie ring light, about razors. And he's just treading water, trying to keep his head above it. And so he's just he's just in a rut, and he needs to get out of it. But he's also got this situation where he can't really get out of it because he's got to be at home looking after his mum 24/7, because he's just not sure what's going on with her.
I've watched 3 episodes of this new version, and 2 things struck me as perhaps different to the original version. Although quite poignant, I remember the original as mainly a comedy. I found this new version to have more elements of drama as well as the comedy. Is that a fair call?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that matches the style of TV that I've always set out to make, because I just don't think that life is all hilarious. And so I really feel like for the comedy for me, it's like you can't have the comedy without the serious bits. That to me is what makes compelling viewing. So that was certainly a choice that we entered into. And again, that might be slightly different to the original, but that's how styles have changed. And we get, what I'll say is when it gets to around about episode 6, it gets pretty real, and there's some really serious moments where we don't have any intention of being funny at all. And it's actually quite almost heartbreaking. So, if you ever saw my series, The Other Guy, you'll know that that's the light and the shade is what I like doing. And if you ever seen any of my stand-up shows, there's always really important moments in those too. So yeah, that's just my style and I like it and I'm not going to change.
All right. And the second thing I noticed is, this is from memory of the original, which is a while ago, is that the show seems like it's a lot more of an ensemble rather than purely focusing on the 2 main leads. Was that also a deliberate change?
Yeah. When you look at the original, it's actually like incredibly impressive how long they could stay in the single location for.
Yeah.
So they would be in the house for quite literally 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And like without a single break, they could just be in the lounge room for 20 minutes going back and forth. And it's like amazing. But whenever we tried to do that in our version, it wasn't because of the styles, because what you were watching back then was basically a live performance in front of a live audience that was being taped via 3 cameras. It made sense, but when you started doing that with our new version, the dynamic and energy of TV shows has changed so much that as an audience member, you expect more.
Yeah.
You kind of need the differences suddenly. And so we just wanted to make sure that the locations were changing and that there was a little bit broader reach for some characters that could talk to a wider kind of audience at times. So the inclusion of Robbie is certainly Robbie being Arthur's sister now. In the original, Robert was the brother. But Robbie definitely, I wouldn't say he's in it any more than the original, but probably brings more, periphery characters along for the ride with her.
This wasn't, and you sort of alluded to this earlier, this wasn't the first thought to do mother and son very recently. This has been a bit of a slow burner for quite a while, hasn't it? And I thought I read there was even talk of actually doing it in front of a studio audience at one stage.
It was like the first question that came up. I mean, it was funny because we sat down with Todd Abbott, who is the head of comedy at ABC, and we hadn't told him what we were meeting him about. And it's kind of like you're nervous when you're talking it because everyone's going to have the same reaction when you say you're going to do it. And they immediately go, no, don't do it. And so you're just like, so we knew what we're up against, right? And Todd had just come into the ABC, and I can't speak for Todd, but he'd only newly been the head of comedy, and I think for him it was difficult to sort of say, "Hey, I'm coming in new to this position. Let's remake a classic." Yeah. So not only put himself in the firing line, but have people say the same thing that they're saying to me. Why are you remaking something? Why don't you make something original? And so, it was a very nerve-wracking sort of meeting, and eventually, even when we were trying to say, "Hey, look, we've got the rights to this really great Australian show. It's a bit of a classic." And straight away he goes, "Please don't tell me it's mother and son." And we were like, well, it actually is. And we had to sort of, still pitch our pitch, shoot our shot. And he came around to it and like everyone did, and then I think he went back to the ABC and said they want to make mother and son. And I think the ABC, the higher beings at the ABC said, no, it's going to be too difficult. And then they read what we'd written, and then they came around. And it's constantly a matter of bringing people around. And I think that that's what's going to happen with the audience. I think so many people are going to say, "Oh, I shouldn't be doing it." And the funny thing is, I think that I've been hearing that ever since I came up with the idea. Yeah. So it's not new to be saying to me, "Oh, why are you remaking? You shouldn't be doing it." Because in my head, I'm like, just watch our show and you'll see it's fine. Two can exist. And so, we thought as soon as we broached it with Todd, he was like, "So would we do this in front of a live audience?" And we just wanted to do a more modern style now. The funny thing is, everyone wants to make a TV show in front of a live audience at the moment. I don't know a single person who doesn't want to take on that challenge. Yeah. But I think in that instance, it would have felt too much like the original, and that's not what we were trying to do.
Well, a lot of people will know you obviously from comedy, but this is not your first rodeo with acting. You're in H2O Just Add Water, and also obviously the other guy on Stan. Are you getting the acting bug now? Are we going to see you as a long lost son of Elf Stewart on Home and Away soon?
Yeah, maybe. You know what? I'm glad you put that out there because you never know. I mean, I studied an acting degree at QUT, studied Bachelor of Fine Arts in Acting. So that is actually what my only qualification is. I've never studied writing, and I've never studied TV production or film and TV. And I certainly never studied stand-up comedy. So funnily enough, being an actor is actually all I'm qualified to be. But I have been doing it sort of on and off. And I guess the reason why I started making my own shows is because there were just not roles for me that I liked. And often, certainly when I started acting in the very early 2000s, the only roles that really popped up for me were American roles, which is why I got, roles like, in Aquamarine, because you're playing the best friend of the guy who's the lead,
Yeah.
and there were more black people in America. So whenever there was American productions, they would always need black actors to be in it. Whereas there was never that need or want in Australia for so long. The H2O thing was funny because I went for one of the roles as the boyfriend of one of the main characters and ended up getting his role as Laurie the dolphin trainer, which was a couple of episodes, but I was working with Jeffrey Walker at the time, who's since gone on to just some seriously incredible stuff. And he got me back for the second season, where I was in a couple of episodes of that. And that still would have to be my most highly recognized role 20 years later. It's like I was like a dolphin trainer for 5 episodes of H2O. And still I'll get people going, "Oh my God, are you Laurie from H2O?" Because the H2O fans are like absolutely fanatical. Like they just love it. And they watched it when they were 10 years old, and now they're 25. And they must have worn the VHS out because they've just watched it so much. And I remember being in Japan once. We went to this restaurant with this comedian friend of ours called Waka. You might have seen him on the Melbourne Comedy Festival Gala. And he took us to this restaurant, and we're in the middle of Japan, and this Canadian family, I think they would have been Japanese Canadian, leaned across and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Excuse me, my daughters have recognized you from TV." And I said, "Oh, I'm positive they haven't, because we're in Tokyo right now and you're Canadian." And I said, where do you guys live? And they said, "Oh, Toronto and stuff." And I said, look, there's literally no way that they would know me from TV. And then they said, "No, they're sure that they've seen you." And I said, "Look, the only thing I might have done would be this dolphin show called H2O 15 years ago." And then he was like, "No, that's it. They love that show. That's exactly the show." And I just couldn't, you can't, the reach of that show around the world is just wild. So it's funny, as an actor, you never know what gigs are going to be the ones that, that sort of help boost you.
Yeah. So, also, I wanted to ask, aside from Mother and Son, what have you been up to lately, and is possibly coming up? Is there still a lot happening for you on the comedy stand-up sort of circuit?
No, I want to keep making TV shows.
Okay.
I really want to make TV shows. I want to keep working with Wooden Horse, producing shows and sort of a slate of my own with them. The goal being to, I've just moved back to Brisbane after being away for 15 years. So what I really want to do is make shows in Brisbane. I want to showcase Brisbane, because we see Melbourne on screen, we see Sydney on screen, and I just want us to appreciate Brisbane for what it is and sort of bring some work to the industry. Because what I don't want to happen is for people to have to move away, like I did. When you were in the early 2000s, it's like you just couldn't really have a solid film and TV career in Brisbane. It just was impossible. So you kind of got to be the change. So I want to move back and actually try to build something here.
Can you remind the audience of your book, Being Black and Chicken and Chips, for people? Because this was shortlisted for Best Newcomer a couple of years back, wasn't it?
Yeah, so that is set in a fake town called Brindlewood, which is basically Brisbane. And it's about a 12-year-old boy, half Ghanaian kid, who's trying to start high school and trying to fit in with all the other kids, while his mum dies of cancer. So, that's heavily, semi-autobiographical, and it was based on a stage. Well, my first solo stand-up show, which ended up winning Best Newcomer with Ronnie Cheng, alongside Ronnie Cheng at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. And that was actually part of the thing that kickstarted my journey into international touring, which put me into shows like the, Hong Kong, Melbourne Comedy Festival roadshow in Singapore and Hong Kong, which I did with Ronnie and with, lo and behold, Denise Scott. Yeah. So it's funny how these things all sort of work together. I always liken, for anyone who's in the industry or cares about trying to sort of what you'd say make it or turn pro, I guess, professional, It's like every single little thing you do just keeps pushing against that damn wall. And you don't really necessarily know what the thing is that's going to be the thing that breaks the wall down. And suddenly all the work starts happening. But if as long as you keep putting pressure on it, so doing the stand-up show, writing the book, I just like doing all of it. And so I just keep putting stuff out there and keep enjoying it. And really my career really changed when I just started making things for me, making things that I wanted to make.
Yeah.
And stop trying to wait for people to, waiting for the phone to call, because it was just not calling. So I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to start doing my own thing. And so I started writing these stories that are personal and semi-autobiographical. And that book, that stand-up show is now the book, Being Black and Chicken and Chips. And we're currently in late stage development for the feature film of that. So I just keep telling stories, whether I'm doing it on the radio or whether I'm doing it on stage or whether I'm doing it on TV. I just like telling stories.
I'm glad you mentioned the feature film, because I couldn't find the reference, but I remember reading somewhere that you were looking to turning the book into a feature film. So you're saying that's sort of in late production now, is it? Is it?
It's in late stage development. Yeah. So, I mean, it's taken a while. There was a pandemic in the middle of it. I had to make 2 TV shows, the second season of The Other Guy, and then this season of Mother and Son. So it's one of those things that I just keep chipping away. But that story's so personal that there's no time limit on it, and plus it's set in 1998. It's not gonna, the story doesn't change from when it happened to now. If it happens, if I tell it today or if I tell it in 2 years' time, it's still going to be the same story.
Yeah. All right. And finally, back to Mother and Son. Look, I don't want to make you any more nervous, but based on a hot show that spanned nearly 50 episodes, had big stars, and ABC is giving you the plum 8:30 Wednesday slot, home to Sean McAuliffe, but Will Anderson, those type of shows, some great new Australian shows in that late 9 p.m. slot as well. You're in that Wednesday slot. I just feel you're going to get a lot of reviews coming in. Obviously some fresh reviews as well, that people that are just seeing this kind of show for the first time and didn't see the original. But obviously with other people, there's an iconic legacy. Are you ready for it?
Yeah, I was talking to Tom Gleason at the Logies, actually, because he was like, man, you're going to get eyeballs. It's 8:30 Wednesday. We're coming fresh off Hard Quiz. And he's like, people will watch it. And there is no doubt about it. And I mean, that's exciting. Like, it's super exciting. It's super exciting to be in the primetime slot. It's super exciting that a lot of people are going to watch it and judge it. And it's just exciting that you're talking to that many voices. I mean, I remember when I started at Triple J, and it's funny because you get used to people not liking you. It's just kind of because you just can't please everyone. So you just get used to people not liking you. And more often than not, you just have to decide you just have to remind yourself that it's not you. It's just that people have different tastes, but that all tastes are valid. So I liken what I do to being a chef. And if I cook a meal it's literally impossible for me to go, okay, I'm going to cook one meal for everyone and we're all going to sit down and eat it at 8:30 on a Wednesday night.
Yeah.
Right. And so I've just got to try and decide the best meal for 500,000 to 1 million people at once. And whatever meal I decide, I've just got to commit to it, and I've just got to make it as best as I can. And ultimately, I've really just got to make a meal that I love and hope that other people like it as well, because I feel like I've got pretty similar tastes to a lot of people. But anytime, if you try to please 500,000 people with one meal, someone's going to be like, oh, this meal's too hot, or this meal's too cold, or I don't like coriander, or I don't feel like beef Wellington today, or whatever. You just cannot please people. But the very fact that you've been able to feed that many mouths is so exciting, that you've been put on that stage. So I'm really, really excited. So when I was working at Triple J, and I remember my first week, I literally remember this guy tweeting at me, including me in the at, saying how bad I was, how much I was a bad replacement for Tom Ballard, how much I shouldn't be in that position. And I remember 3 years later, when we announced that we were leaving Triple J, I remember a tweet coming saying, I'm going to miss these guys so much. It was the same guy. It was I remember him vividly. I was like, you sent hate mail to me at the beginning, and now you're going to miss me. So, sometimes people just need to sort of give things a chance first.
Yeah.
I hated olives when I first ate them, and now I really like olives. It's just, but also I've hated banana my whole life. Nothing will change that. I don't know what's going to make people's taste buds, tingle. I've just got to make sure that I do what I really like. And I think I've done that with this show.
Well, I thought it was a pretty good meal. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.
Best of luck, Matt, to yourself, Denise, and the team on reimagining this iconic Aussie series. And it's great seeing Australian comedy in prime time on free to air. So we don't see that too often. Thank you for joining me here at TV Central.
Thanks, Aaron. Really appreciate it.
All right, that was Matt Okine playing the lovable Arthur in the new Mother and Son, which will have its world premiere on Wednesday, the 23rd of August at 8:30 p.m. on ABC TV and ABC iView. Well, that's it for this podcast. For all the latest television news, streaming options, ratings, television guides, and podcasts, head to tvcentral.com.au. But for now, I'm Aaron Ryan, and thanks to Matt Okine. Bye for now.